Hi everyone, it's Sally here and welcome back to my LK150 video series number 2 on hens and edgings. We are going to move on to the second lesson today, which is going to be about ribs. I think this video is going to be needed, I'm going to need to split it into two because if I overrun more than about 30 minutes, Facebook doesn't like it. I know, as I said before, YouTube is okay, but Facebook doesn't. So I think that this needs two videos. So the first one is going to be on true ribbing, which on the machine is a reformed or latched rib. And by hand it's knitted on knitting needles, knit one, purl one. So a true rib is knit one, purl one, stitch configuration, or a combination, you know, knit two, purl two, knit three, purl one, whatever you want. But it does involve true rib and purl stitches. And in the second part I'll then look at mock ribbing. So just to remind you of what those are. You know, this one at the bottom here is mock rib. If I stretch it apart, these ladders in between are what create the illusion of rib. It's knitted on a tighter tension, so it pulls in, but there is no stitch on the reverse there, purl stitch on the reverse. It's just ladders. These two here are both true ribs. At the bottom is a reformed latched rib done on the machine, and at the top a hand knit one, purl one. As you can see, there's quite a difference in appearance between those two. Although I consider myself to be a reasonably neat knitter, I'm obviously no way as neat as a knitting machine. You know, which one you choose is going to be down to you. In terms of when I want a true rib, I will hand knit it, but that is a personal choice for me because I have arthritis, I have back trouble, and sitting at the machine for lengths of time to do all that manual reforming of the stitches I just find a bit difficult these days. So, and I hand knit, and I quite enjoy just taking the bits of knitting into my sitting room of an evening and doing all the hand knit afterwards. Not a problem for me, but obviously some of you don't hand knit, so you'll be looking at doing this one. So we'll look at these two first and then the mock ribs afterwards. In terms of what I choose to use and when, I will choose a proper true rib, usually on a garment, where I want there to be a ribbed edging, you know, because it's stretchy, it keeps its shape, and you know, most sweaters and cardigans have ribbed edgings to them. And I think it looks the nicest. I usually knit my ribs afterwards. As I said, I take the bits away and knit the ribbing on afterwards. This is because when I hand knit, my cast on tension can be quite tight, and I find that I can't stretch the knitting across the machine if I do the ribbing first and then put it on the machine. You know, I learnt by bitter experience of spending ages hand knitting all my ribs and then coming to the machine and I couldn't get the blasted things on there. So I don't do it that way around anymore. I do the knitting on the machine first and hand knit the ribs afterwards. So that's a true ribbing. Mock rib is a great alternative for use on sort of accessories and things. The one on the board was let's get it again. This is a 1x1 mock rib. So you've just got one knit stitch showing on the front. On my hats and mitts set, oops, bits of yarn on there. This is a 2x1 mock rib arrangement. And you pull it apart and say there's two stitches and then the ladder. Same on the mittens. And this is a 3x1. This is from Anna Haferman's YouTube tutorial on doing a bubble tuck hat, which is a great project. So if you haven't looked at that one already, I recommend you go and have a look. She's got lots of other fantastic videos on different things as well. So there we go. So it's a 3x1. But for things like that, where you can then knit the entire project very quickly on the machine, is a brilliant option. So that's when I would use a mock rib. On garments, I just find that mock rib after a while just loses its shape a bit and doesn't hold the welts, and particularly the neck bands can get very stretched and baggy, especially on kids. You know what kids are like, they're pulling their clothes around. There we go. So that's where I would choose what. Okay, so let's start off by doing the latch rib. You will need waste yarn, main yarn and a ravel cord, and you will need a transfer tool and a latch tool as well. Oh, I thought I'd lost my latch tool, but no, there it is. So this is described very comprehensively in the instruction book. It's on, put my glasses on so I can see what I'm doing. It's on page 41. Now, if you are a hand knitter, you will know as well that ribs are usually knitted at a tighter tension than the main body of a stocking stitch. That's right, now I've lost my tissue. Oh, it's on the floor. Excuse me a minute. Yeah, ribs are knitted at a tighter tension. So you usually go down 2 needle sizes on hand knitting. The same goes on the machine. The ribs are generally knitted at a tighter tension. So I think it says on here, it's recommended to set the stitch dial 1 to 2 numbers lower than the original number. I would actually suggest 2 to 3 numbers. In this sample I'm knitting, I'm going to do 2. Let's put you out the way. So first of all, it says put your required number of needles into work. Now I usually pull mine out to D. Yeah, it says pull the required number of needles into work. So I've got an odd number here. I put them in B position, so I'll just run my carriage across to a line and then put every alternate needle back out of work. And then using your waste yarn, cast on. Now for the waste yarn and cast on, I will keep it at main tension, so I'm still on stitch size 4 on here. Oops. Now, my usual method is to make a loop in the end of my yarn and hook it on a clamp underneath, because it leaves me with both hands free, and feed it through the carriage. So, knit 1 row with waste yarn and hang the cast on comb. So far, so normal. Oops, oh. I have one of these, I call it my twiddly stick. I'm not quite sure what its proper name is, a yarn holder, but it's a, as you can see, it's a thingy on the spike, and it's very good for putting your cakes on there, particularly when there's not a lot of it left and they get a bit lightweight and bounce about the place. So hang the cast on comb. Whoops. So I haven't set this up very centrally. Let's get rid of these. Slightly overdid it over on this side, that's better. So I've got an even number either side of 0. And so I think you leave them A out. Yeah, you just have to put 1 extra into work on the right hand side and then knit back. Yeah, that's right. So you've now got 2 needles together on the right hand side and then alternate needles knitting. So just knit a few rows and end with the carriage on the left. Managed to get a big loop caught over there, never mind. Thing to remember with waste yarn cast on is it's waste yarn, and the idea is it's going to be discarded. So if you have a little bit of a, what we in Britain call a cock up, don't worry about it. You know, it's your waste yarn, it's going to come off. Whatever if I can teach you anything, it's just don't be afraid of mistakes. You know, we all make them. We all make them. And we all have disasters where, you know, the gods of knitting are smiling on us. End with the carriage on the left. Yeah, that's normal. It happens. Don't fret over it. Right, so I've cut my waste yarn. And in actual fact, I'm now going to take this comb off. I don't like cast-on combs. They're cast-on combs, they're not weights. You know, I prefer to use my little claw weights. Okay. So now I need to knit my ravel cord row. Probably gone and lost my ravel cord. Oh, here it is. So I normally manually feed these through the carriage. If you haven't got ravel cord, you don't know where to get it. This is actually Kumihimo braiding thread, which I have bought from Amazon. It's a 0.8mm thickness, and some of them come up a little bit thicker than the standard ravel cord, but it does the job just as well, especially on the mid and the chunky machines. The fact that it's a little bit thicker doesn't even matter. In fact, it's probably a good idea. But yeah, so you can buy huge, great big, like 100-metre spools for, I can't remember what it was, £8–10, something like that. And so you've got 100 yards plus on a 100-metre spool. So yeah, feed this manually through the carriage and knit one row. And now we're going to switch to main yarn. Set the stitch dial to R. Now if you look on your dial, right the way down here, you've got below the number 1, you've got an R setting, and this enables you to knit at a much, much tighter tension than what's on the dial. But it is specifically only for the initial cast-ons for your ribbing. For those of you that have a metal machine with a ribbing attachment, these next rows, the 3 rows you do at R, replicate the circular rows that you do on your metal machine. And the idea is to create a very tight edge. So now, thread up with my main yarn and switch it over to the twiddle stick. Knit 3 rows. Just make sure it's knitting through. 2 and 3. Now the next thing you have to do is to, between these 2 needles on the right hand side, down at the bottom here, you should see a loop between the first and the second stitch, which is this thing here, if you can see that. I'll tip you down a bit. It's this loop. Oops, my needle slipped. I'm not showing it. It's this one here. So I'll put that where you can see it. Right, I'll put you back to the right place. So you need to pick up that loop and put it on the first needle. Oops. And then bring the needles in A into B position. I'm going to knit them all now, and now you will knit the number of rows you require for your ribbing. I shan't do an enormous number, 10 or so to bring it back, carriage back to the right, so in actual fact it's going to be 11. Oops, I forgot to reset my tension. Not to worry, reset it now to 2. Yeah, so when you do that, remember to reset your tension. Too busy talking. It won't make much of a difference, it'll just mean I've got a couple of rows at the tight tension. So there is my rows of ribbing done. So now we need to take our weights off, and now's where we're going to start latching up the ribbing. So you need to remove your weights because they will get in the way. Now obviously you've got a line of holes across here which need to line up with where you're going to make your reformed rib. So if you want to do a different configuration other than 1x1 ribbing, which is what's showing you here, you need to take that into account when you're setting up your needle arrangement at this point on the waste yarn. If you want a 2x1, you'd have 2 needles in work, then a space, 2 needles in work, then a space. Right, so take the third needle and drop the stitch off of it and ladder it all the way down. You might need to poke it a bit if it's got whiskers of thread that are catching, so you need to ladder it all the way down. Make sure you can see what I'm doing. All the way down to the ravel cord. Now here you need to get the bottom loop above the ravel cord, go under the bottom one, over the next 2, and then pick up the 4th loop and latch it through, and then you just latch up all the way up to the top. Oops, come on. This yarn is quite whiskery. There we go. Oops. No, I've missed it. So if you drop a stitch, try to catch it on a transfer tool and then put it back onto the latch tool. Push these back so that the other stitches don't pop off there. God. You can see why I don't do this very often. I'm very candid at it. And then when you've done the last one, hook it back onto its needle. So there you've got your first line of reformed rib. So skip a stitch and drop the next one down. Again, you might need to poke it a bit to get them to unravel, especially with a hairy yarn. So go under the first loop, over the next 2, under the 4th, and latch it, and then latch all the way up to the top. So I'll just do a couple more of these and then remove from the machine. I won't do all the way across because we'll be here all day and I don't want my video to be too long. But essentially this is what you repeat all the way over. Go. Skip one, drop one, so under the bottom loop, over the next 2, under the 4th, and latch up. Hook it on there. So there we have it. Yeah, repeat all the way across. Now time's getting away with me, so I won't do any more than that. When you go back to continue your main knitting, so you put some weights on, and remember to increase up to your main tension, which is going to be 4 here, and carry on knitting. Reset your row count as well if you need to. Oops, just heard something fall over. Can't see what it was. I have to have this so close to me. I keep hitting it, sorry. Right, cut the yarn and remove. Okay, so there we have it. So remove the ravel cord and the waste yarn will drop away. On this bit you've obviously got your nice rib edge, but on the bit that I haven't latched it's still open, so it will come undone. That's your ribbed edge there. So I think it gives a very close approximations to what you get on a standard gauge or even a chunky one knitting machine. If you've got a ribber, that is a rib done on my standard gauge ribber, and you can see the edging looks very similar, so it does give you something that looks like a machine knitted, well, essentially it is a machine knitted edge. There we go. Right, so that is latch tool rib. Now the next option for true rib, as I said earlier, is to hand knit it. Now again, I'm not going to have a massive number of stitches in work. Start again with waste yarn. And as I said, I start with waste yarn, go into knitting the main body of the garment, then I pick up from the waste yarn and hand knit the ribs afterwards. So you'd always be on main tension, cast on. So this is just a little piece. Now knit a good section of waste yarn. You know, 3 or 4 rows isn't enough. You want at least 10, if not 12. Oops. And the combs come off anyway. Let's put some weights on. This end needle's not knitting back. Again, finish with the carriage on the left and knit 1 ravel cord row. And then just start your main knitting. So if I knit about 20 rows. Keeping quite a careful eye on this ball of wool here, because there's not a lot of it left and it might catch. If you find that your yarn is catching and you get a bit of tight tension in your row, you must undo it and re-knit it, because it will stick out like a sore thumb if you don't. And that's why rewinding these balls into cakes or cones, whatever, I mean, if you've got a cone winder that uses one of these, good idea. But if you know any deviation in the smoothness of the flow from the overhead is going to muck up your tension, and it really will stick out. You you won't be able to hide it, I'm afraid. Whoops. Now, that was another very common knitter's problem. Loop at the end of the yarn, at the end of the knitting on the side there. Now, why does it do that? I don't know. It probably got caught on the brush. So, perfect excuse to unravel a row or two. Just take it out and pull it off. There we go. I actually think I've got a ropey brush on the right hand side of my carriage, one that possibly needs replacing, because I notice it happens quite frequently on the right hand side, not so much on the left. So if you've unravelled rows, remember to turn your row counter back. And this needle's not knitting very well. And likewise, remember to move your edge weights up frequently. As you can see, this side here loses tension very quickly. And when you lose tension, that's when problems occur. Right, so I've lost count of how many rows that was. 22, I think. Anyway, that will do. Take that off. And then I'll show you how I pick up and hand knit the rib. Now, as I said earlier, ribbing is knitted at a tighter tension than the main body of the stocking stitch work. And if you have got a band with your ball of wool, it usually gives you a recommended needle size. Here it is, UK 8, US 6, metric 4mm. But for ribbing, I'd normally go down 2 needle sizes. So I've got 2 pairs of needles with me, 4mm and a 3.25, so that's the next but one size down. But I will pick up the edging, or the edge of it, on the main knitting needle size. Now you'll see that on the side here you've got this little side loop and then the first loop of the knittings. You're picking up across the bottom edge of this, not the top edge, and so you will always have this little side loop. Ignore it, it will just drop away. So pick up this first loop and then carry on all the way across. You can see that. Whoops. And it will also mean, because you're picking up the bottom, that you end up with one less stitch than you cast on with. So ideally you want an odd number or the correct multiple for doing your own configuration of rib, but for knit one purl one it's usually an odd number. So I've knitted up all of those stitches, and again you get like a half a loop on the other end. I don't worry too much about that, but find your end of your ravel cord and pull it out, and then your waste will come away. Now if you are a hand knitter, you'll know what I'm talking about here. The way you pick these up, sorry, just trying to find my other needle, means that the stitch has been crossed on the needle. So for the first row that you're going to knit, you need to knit into the back of the stitch. And so I usually knit one row into the back of the stitch. So join up my yarn and knit the first row across, knitting into the back of the stitch. So always knit into the back on this. You only have to do it on this first row, and then after that you're ready to start your rib knitting. Now when I get to the bottom of my rib knitting, I cast off in rib, and sometimes if I want to make sure that my rib edge is not going to pull in too tight, I will use 1 or 2 sizes bigger of a knitting needle to do the cast off row with. So now when you're looking at your knitting pattern, look at it very carefully and look to see whether you've got increases or decreases between the rib section and the main body of the work, because this is the row where you would need to incorporate the increase decrease into your knitting. And so you would either, obviously I normally would do knit 2 together, or for a decrease, and then for an increase I would either do an up one, which means picking up the bar and knitting into the back of it, or sometimes a knit into the front and back of the same stitch. If you're a hand knitter, you'll know what I'm talking about. So once you're ready to start your rib, change to the smaller size needle and do your ribbing. 2, 4, 6, 8, 14, 16. So I've actually got 20 stitches here, so just pull down some yarn. So I'm going to do knit 1, purl 1, knit 1, purl 1, all the way across, and then obviously just repeat for the required length. Now for a normal regular jumper, I wouldn't, or sweater, I wouldn't normally do much in the way of increasing, decreasing between the rib and the main body, but I noticed that it's quite prevalent on patterns that use yarns that don't have a lot of stretch. The ribbing seems to be done on quite a few extra stitches, you know, 10, 12, 15 extra stitches than the main body. So yeah, just have a look at your garment and what it is, and decide whether you want to have the increases or decreases. So if you've changed the yarn, you might not need to. So there I've set up my rib row, and you can see my knits and purls coming across here. And as I say, I would then cast off in rib. So I hope that shows you how I would do hand knit edging. In the second video, I'll show you how to do the mock rib setup. I'll just finish quickly by talking again about this piece I did on my other knitting machine, because I did mention it as an option. This is actually, I think it was 40 stitches. Yes, it is. But 40 stitches on the standard bed machine, standard gauge machine. It's obviously a lot closer together than 40 stitches on the mid gauge. So if I put 20 and 20 out here, you can see the distance I'd be having to pick up those stitches, and it only just goes. So if you're thinking about using your other machine, just bear this in mind, that you've got to account for the extra stretch. I was quite pleased at how my standard gauge knitted that. Knitted it a lot easier than I was expecting it to, but anyway, I digress. Your other option, of course, is to knit this on your other machine. Knit your piece on, let's see if I can find it, this example here, and then you know, put the two together and graft them. I've got very good at grafting lately. I've been doing a lot of it, and yeah, practice makes perfect, doesn't it? So hey presto, I've got very good at grafting. It's, you know, invisible seam now across there, so that's another option. Just, you know, pointing these things out, but there we go. Right, on to the next video.